Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and it seems like such a long time since I've made my last video review. Now I do apologise for the lateness of what we're going to be covering today, which is the Nvidia GTX670. They tried to deliver it on the day that I left for I-Series, and obviously when I got back from I-Series I'd been struck by a deadly amount, or I can't even think of the word I'm looking for, but I was taken pretty ill, which is the reason for the lateness of the video. But in the time that I've had to test this, it's also given me a good chance to be able to kind of get a relatively good feel for it as well. And hopefully I'll be able to explain a lot of things more in depth rather than as I would have been before, trying to get it rushed for the NDA, because when I would have received the card, I would have only had a couple of 3 days to have got everything ready. So I've taken a little bit longer than I normally would have done. I could have had this ready last week, but we spent a little bit longer. There are going to be other gameplay videos that you're going to be able to go and see and check out. We'll also do a little bit of gameplay in this video. What I'm going to do now is bring you in for a good look around the card. Then I'll show you it on the test system as it is behind me and explain to you all the bits and bobs. And then we'll move into some benchmarks, as I said, some gameplay, and then wrap it all up with a nice big conclusion at the end. So I'm going to, well really I should kind of talk to you about some of the specs nice and early really, and I've had to write them down because I can't remember everything. But obviously the 670, the 570 rather, was an amazing card. So the levels have been put pretty high for this, but from the 680, the 680 was 1006 megahertz base clock, and then that ramped up to 1058 with the kind of boost mode, and it had 1536 shaders. Now the 670 has got a 915 megahertz base with 980 on the boost, and 1344 shaders. So a little bit of a ramp, a little bit of a drop on the shaders, and then also a little bit on the megahertz as well. But we will see how this tests out in both stock and overclock mode. Don't forget that you can go to the link underneath and see the full review at Overclock 3D, which you'll be able to see all the graphs and all the games and all the write-up as well. So please make sure you click that link. But as I said, I'm going to be quiet now, bring you in for a good look around the card, and then we'll move into a look at it on the test bench as well. Right then peeps, quick look around the card itself. First of all, it's just a stock OEM Nvidia card, not one of the branded vendor cards. You can't technically buy these. This is just, like I said, it's an OEM sample I get sent directly from Nvidia. First things first, two 6-pin power connectors. Around the back we've got two DVIs, one's a DVI-D, one's not. Then we've got a HDMI and a full-size display port. Flipping round to the back of the card, as you can see though, the PCB actually stops here, and this is all kind of added on extra, and it's where the fan is basically. It is a bit of a strange one. It's something I want to cover more in the main part of the review. Main part of the conclusion, but as you can see where the PCB stops here, another thing is the fact that the power connectors are so far in from the end of the card, so you're going to end up with big loops of cable. So it is a strange one, and like I said, it is something I do want to cover more in the conclusion and later on in the video. But there we go, that's your up close look of the card. It's time now to take a look at what it looks like in the test system. Right then peeps, we as you can see, we've got it on the test rig. I'm just going to move the camera up a little actually, just so that you can see a little bit better. I'm picking the tripod up. I'm having a very good day today. Right, there we go. Right, so as I said in the look of when we just had a look at the card just previously, the two 6-pins here, it doesn't make cabling very easy, and to be honest, it does just look messy. I'm going to cover the kind of my thoughts on this a lot more in the conclusion, but I do like the standard shroud. It's just a shame that these aren't like on the end or something. If they were placed on the end, it'd be much easier, it'd be much nicer. I'm sure they could have done it if they'd really wanted to. Test rig. Today we've got the 3960X at 4.6 GHz as we always run. We've got Corsair GTX8 memory running at 2133. H80 we're running at the moment because I've got the two H100s still on a dual Xeon rig. But we've got Noctua NFF12 fans on there. Obviously Rampage 4 Extreme. And then the power supply that we're running today is an AX750. More than enough power. And that's about it really. So we're going to be running this. All the games will be turned to absolute maximum as ever. Don't ask me if the Uber sampling or something's turned on. When I say that the everything's turned to max, that's because it means I can't turn anything up anymore. Resolution will be 1920 by 1080, so a standard 24-inch HD size, and we'll be testing everything like that. But like I said, apart from this, I do think it looks the part. I really don't want to go in too much into what I think about this just yet. We'll cover it more in the conclusion. But connections, we have two DVIs, there's a HDMI and a full-size display port around the back. So plenty of options there, including your multi-screen options as well. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to move on to the benchmarking. Right then peeps, moving on to the benchmarking, we're going to start with 3D Mark 11. Now as I've been doing a lot recently, I've been using a screenshot so I can show you the results quicker. I think this way is a little bit better than me just sticking a graph up as well. So on the left hand side we have a stock GTX670, so the big daddy card on the left hand side. On the right hand side we've got the stock 670. So we can see on the left we've got a score of 9,249 for the 680 and then 8,608 for the 670. So you're looking there at roughly a 550 point drop for the 670, which when you consider it really isn't too bad a score. But if we overclock the 670, the score goes up to 9,173. Now with a 915 base clock and then a 980 boost, we managed to overclock it up to 1045 base, which gives us a 1110 boost. So fairly healthy up there. We got 130 base clock extra essentially. So really healthy score. And as you can see, that was, you know, really easily achieved. Not a massive amount of time spent there. Obviously the boost, it's not as much as some of the other cards that we've been used to in the past, but you can see that the scores do get you there. We get then within kind of 70 points of the 680. Something else we also need to consider is that's like, by that little bit of overclocking, you've kind of bridged the gap for the extra 150 odd quid that it would have cost you if you wanted to have bought the 680. So if we go back to the standard cards, what we'll do is we'll flick across and we'll go up to 3D Mark 11X. Now this is a really good test because it kind of takes away any like ideas of bottlenecking or anything like that, but I hate that. You're never really going to get a bottlenecking with a single card, especially on this system. But anyway, we get 3,185 with the 680 and then 2,974 with the 670. If we look at the overclock result though, we go up to 3,190. So it's just ever so slightly pulls in front. But obviously one thing that we do need to consider is the 680 results are the original ones with the original drivers. Okay, we are on original drivers for the 670, but Nvidia have had a lot more time to work on the newer architecture. So it kind of comes up to an even Stevens result there, near enough. Now if we move on again, we move into 3D Mark Vantage for the P score. Now, we have 37,712 for the 680. That's with a GPU score of 35,352. Now the CPU scores on these do look wildly different, and I've not been able to work out why really, because there's a 10,000 point difference. but they were run at exactly the same settings, everything. Really not been able to work out what this 10,000 point difference was. But anyway, we'll roll with it. So yeah, 37,712 for the 680, 32,482 for the 670. Now if we move along, hang on, I do apologise. If we move along, we can see that overclocking the 670, we got 33,741. So still quite a difference on this one. You don't really get the benefits with Vantage as much as you did 3D11. So we move on again to the X score. 19,610. And then we got 17,877. So we'll have a look at see what the overclock score is. That moves us up to 18,952. As you can see there, really the gap has closed a fair bit again with the overclocking, with the X score. That's still with the CPU score, showing slightly lower. But as you can see with the GPU score, we've got 18,482 on the 670 overclocked, and then 19,025 with the 680. So you can see that the GPU scores are significantly closer there, just to show you how well you can overclock these and the scores that you can get. Now what I'm going to do is we do the basic benchmarks like that. If you want to go and see any of the other kind of synthetic benchmarks, go and take a look at the main overclock 3D review. What I'm going to do quickly now is actually just show you some temperature results for the 670. Now if we have a look down here, what we can see is we had the value at the time the settings were taken, the minimum and then the maximum. It's the maximum that we really wanted to do. What I did is I looped Unigine, just open and ran Unigine and left it looping for 30 minutes. That was after a 15-minute idle time, so it gives the kind of card a chance to kind of settle down. And as we can see, we got a 78 degree maximum temperature. This was in its stock form. But if we go to overclock and have a look, we can see that because of the way that they work, you can see that we got a 78 degrees maximum as well. Now that was with the fans. They stayed exactly the same at maximum, 1950 RPM. So basically the card works pretty well. It's just with that overclocking, you don't get a massive hike in temperatures, which is pretty good. 78 degrees is slightly warmer than some of the other cards, but the cards are Nvidia's are designed to kind of be run slightly warmer, but they also stay quieter as well. They're definitely, if you were going to go between kind of the AMDs and then the Nvidias generally do, as a rule of thumb, win out on the they make a lot less noise, but they might be ever so slightly warmer. Now for me, I much prefer a quieter rig, because these cards are designed to be run up to about 90-95 degrees anyway, so the fact that we're just running 80, it's perfectly fine. Both these temperatures were taken with the room at a static 21 degrees as well, so it's an easy way for you to be able to work out the delta temperatures there should you want to. But many of you will moan anyway because it wasn't run in a system, and it was run in the open bench rig. But anyway, what we'll do now is I'll open and run some benchmarks for you. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the camera quickly, and then we'll do a couple of the simple benchmark runs, and then we'll also go into some gameplay. Right then peeps, first off we start off with Batman. Now explaining the numbers at the top, 62 degrees, temperature of the card, pretty self-explanatory. The 98%, just flick down to 67% there. The numbers in the middle, that's actually the core utilisation or the load on the GPU. The number on the outside, 39%, that's the fan speed percentage. 1220 megabyte then is the video memory that's being used. And then the last number at the bottom, 62.1 FPS, that is obviously the frames per second of the card. VSync is set to off before people start to ask, and the game is completely maxed out. We've turned everything up as much as we possibly can on 1920 by 1080. Now, the reason why I've not got any audio on is YouTube can get a bit funny with some games with them being used in the video, and it kind of picks them up with the audio. So we don't run the audio in some of the games now. Batman's normally alright though. We thought you'd rather see the game rather than not see the game. Batman is updated as much as possible. It's still not brilliant with DirectX 11 with all the physics and everything turned on, but we'll run it like this. Hopefully at some point they will learn and and get it fixed. Now another thing that people ask is why I video the screen and why I don't use fraps to screen grab it and kind of record it that way. Well, if you do it that way, then you get a noticeable drop in frames per second with fraps running. Now that would be alright if we did it that way all the time. But then the frames per second from the video to the main review would be different. So we do it this way, so you're actually getting a true reading of the benchmarks, so it kind of ties in with the main review. If I was just doing a gameplay video, then yeah, there's a possibility that I could just use fraps. But for the main benchmarking side of the videos like this, where we're just giving you a visual representation of what's going on, it's much more accurate if I do it for you this way. But anyway, that's enough Batman for now. What we're going to do now is move on. Moving on to Crysis 2. Again, just want to reiterate that we are doing this just as kind of to let you see what the card does play like. This is in stock mode as well. Game's absolutely maxed out with all the high textures and basically as much as we can possibly turn it up. Another thing I want to mention is we've got a new boy playing the games today. So hello, Steve-O.
Hello, Steve-O.
Before you all start saying where's Straubs, Straubs has decided he wanted to leave, and we will leave that there. Steve-O is the new boy now. He's going to be doing all the gameplay for us from now on. I've not actually taught him how to make a decent cup of tea yet, but give it time. That's probably the most crucial thing I need to teach him. Isn't that right, Steve-O?
Yeah.
Pardon?
I can make tea.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's not very well.
That's what you need to learn. So pretty healthy frames per second there, like I said, considering we are running the card at stock. I've seen low 50s as a base. We've got a pretty action-packed kind of scene going on at the moment, and it's still kind of averaging around the kind of 60 frames per second mark. Right then, that's enough of Crysis 2. Let's get moving on. Right, playing Dirt 3. This is the Gymkhana. Apparently, I'm told it's kind of like a free roam, kind of do what you want kind of idea. It's the first time we've tried it on the video, so we'll give it a go and see what we think. It's also Steve-O's first try of playing with the keyboard, and as you can see, he's really not doing very well. At all. But it gives us all something to laugh at. I honestly thought that was someone had come out the windscreen then, and it was a bit of bumper falling off. Anyway, as you can see, frames per second are up through the roof, so it's perfectly capable of playing this. But it's just a shame that Steve-O doesn't seem to be able to play it on the keyboard. Anyway, let's move on. Right, and peeps, on to Metro. Still quite a demanding game, as you can see. 36.4 frames per second. Will we dip down to 20s then? Get in quick! Ah! Monster fodder. Nom, nom. Two in short session. He jumped miles then. What the bloody hell's going on? He died. Right, that's the end of this section as always. So let's move on. Last but not least, Witcher, after a 12 gigabyte update. Horrific updates on this game. If ever I don't run it, it's generally because it's trying to update some monster update and I can't be bothered to wait. Even the video cutscenes on this seem quite demanding, as you can see, 34.9 frames per second. Hopefully we'll get to some more fighting bits in a minute. This is a new part of the game for us. Kill them! Yucking! Someone firing bullets or arrows. That matey there's firing arrows, kill him.
This guy?
Yeah, that one. Anyway, as you can see with this, it does stay around the kind of 30 frames per second mark. It's still quite playable. Definitely would benefit from maybe a little bit of an overclock on the CPU. Overclock on the GPU, but the game's really demanding. You get much more frames per second if you turn the Uber sampling off. It's just where we've got this game completely maxed out. It really is a proper resource hog. But it does go to show that even with it maxed out, you can still easily play it on the 670. Anyways, that's enough for this now. It's time for us to move on to the conclusion. Right then peeps, you've made it to the conclusion, and it seems like such a while since I've had to do one of these, so let's hopefully that I don't go round in circles too much. But we'll start off with the award, and then we'll kind of, you know, explain why. There's a lot of little things that I do want to talk about with this as well, mainly kind of speculation and my thoughts on what's going on, but we'll go there anyway. Award, Gold Award. Price, we're expecting this to come in around the £300 mark. Out the box, the card performs brilliantly, as you would expect. We'll have to see with time whether the aftermarket vendors bring us slightly lower temperatures with different heat sinks and stuff like that. But it's kind of the heat sinks, one of the things that I really want to go into, and it's slightly off topic with the review as such, but in more kind of my thoughts or speculating on things that have been brought up in the past. There were a lot of rumours that the 680 was technically meant to have been the 660, and that the Nvidia was kind of so underwhelmed with the performance of the 7000 series AMD cards. What they basically did is completely restructure the branding for the cards. Because what would have been the point of them bringing out the card that should have been the 680, which, if rumours are to be believed, would have been twice as fast as the 670, or at least like 60-70% faster. Why would they want to bring that out and absolutely trounce the market? So rumours are that they've actually held back the big cards for if and when we ever see any replacements for the 7000 series cards. What they did is brought the 660 out, rebranded it as the 680, and then it literally came in at almost exactly the speeds of the 7970, which would kind of make sense. And it was like frames per second between the two cards as well. Now, these were all rumours, massive rumours, and this is where my thoughts on the 670 kind of make me lean towards the fact of believing those rumours a little bit more, because if you think about the size of the PCB on this card, it's tiny. If you didn't have that fan hanging off the end, it would be so short, it would almost be like 2/3 the length of a motherboard. You would think it was an amazingly cheap card, which is why I think that, kind of thinking outside the box, this probably would have been the 650 if the older, original branding had been carried forward. And I think Nvidia have kind of added that fan onto the end of the PCB to make the card look longer and obviously make it look more expensive. I do think it's a bit of an afterthought as well. I think if they had brought the card out at the PCB length, it probably wouldn't have been very popular because, like I said, having to pay 300 quid for a card that looks tiny and looks like it belongs in a HTPC would kind of, you know, a lot of people would have kind of shied away from it. So they've kind of added that on. By just adding that on, they've then left the PCI Express connections kind of floating in the middle of no man's land. If they'd have moved those PCI connections through whatever way they would have had to have done, even if it was kind of like strip connectors and stuff, and had it at the end of the fan, then I don't think anyone would have ever asked any questions, or at least not as many questions as they do now, where you've got that blatantly, you know, it's kind of a marker. There's the end of the PCB. All of this has kind of been added on. But the thing is that's not to say that it's not an amazing card, because it does perform amazingly well. Even if this had have been the 650, we still would have been saying the same thing. I don't think they would have been charging 300 quid for it, but we still would have been saying it's a, you know, an amazing card. And no matter what happens, this is the 670 now. Whether it was going to be something else at the beginning, it doesn't really matter. I think this card's going to fly off the shelves. The only problems I see long term, really, are if people are going to want to water cool this card. Because if you water cool it, you've then lost all that extra real estate that they've added on to the end of the heatsink and suddenly got a tiny card again. Something else that I do think is, considering that they have added that fan into the middle of nowhere, and they could have done whatever they wanted with it, I do kind of think that the temperatures are, you know, a bit mediocre. Considering the size of it, I don't see why we couldn't have had the fan in there from the 680 or something like that, to just have brought those temperatures down, you know, that little bit more. It doesn't get loud by any shakes of the imagination at the moment, but I just think that, considering they've had to go to all this extra effort to, you know, move the fan out and redesign everything, they maybe could have, you know, tried a little bit harder. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Overclocking wise, if you're willing to spend a little bit of time with it, you can have this thing up to you know, near enough kind of 680 speeds, which was kind of the reason why we've gone with the Gold Award, because it is fairly well priced, and it does perform really, really well. Out the box, yeah, brilliant. Willing to spend a bit of time with it, you're talking, you know, like I said, near enough 680 speed, which is kind of where we want to be anyway. A lot of people are willing to spend time overclocking and tweaking their cards and stuff. And I'd actually go as far to say is, when you overclock this card, you get more out of it than you will do the 680 anyway. With the 680, I found it kind of underwhelming. It didn't leave me thinking to myself, I've actually achieved something. With this, you kind of do. And I would go as far as to say that I think that when the aftermarket, like the vendors and stuff, start bringing their own stuff in, the overclock cards with better cooling and stuff like this, I honestly see the scores on these things being pushed even further. Because I think that I'm not saying that I've got a bad sample, because 1100 megahertz boost is never going to be a bad score, but I do think that with maybe slightly better improved power circuitry, better cooling, maybe even an 8-pin chucked on there to wang some more power in as well, I do see you know, more things being able to be eked from this chip, and I do see the kind of gap being closed down from the 680 a little bit more as well. One thing I do think though is, I can kind of understand why Nvidia didn't kind of completely redesign the PCB again. I do think they have missed a bit of a trick there, because I think if they had have made it, you know, slightly bigger so it didn't look like such a tiny card, that they may have, you know, sold even more of them. So I think this is now going to be left down to the vendors. This is the OEM card. I would not be surprised in the slightest if suddenly the vendors are bringing out cards with a much bigger PCB, just so, like I said, they can put more power phases on it, or upgrade this and upgrade that and have better cooling. If it was me, that would be the way I would go as a vendor, to try and take away from that kind of small kind of, you know, 670 kind of look. If this is the way this one is now, it's going to be interesting to see if there is a 660, the kind of size that's going to be, or whether we're going to be looking at a card that will be sharing the same PCB as this, but just with a normal cooler. So we'll have to see. So the long and short of it is, it's an amazing card. It's just one of those cards that kind of leaves me personally with a few questions in my head. and kind of not reservations so much, because the performance is most definitely there, but it's just kind of in my nitpicky nature, kind of maybe overthinking too much about what's going on behind the scenes. But like I said, it's an amazing card, and I would, for the majority of you, and I do mean the majority of you, I would say that the 670 is probably a better purchase for you than the 680. In that, because you can close those gaps up and you don't really get as much from the overclocking with the 680 as you possibly, that you could do, this is a wiser buy. You're better off spending your money on a 670, especially if you're running a single 24-inch screen. And by 24-inch screen, I'll rephrase that, I'll say a 1920 by 1080 screen, because it doesn't matter how big your screen is, it's the pixels that we're talking about, the amount of them. So if you're running a 1920 by 1080 screen, this card will be, perfect. Team it up with Ivy, Sandy, whatever you're going to be running. One of these will be awesome. Chuck a second one in there as well, and you're going to be laughing. I think the only kind of time when people are going to be needing to think about moving on to the 680 is when you're either running massive resolutions, or you quite literally want to turn everything to the absolute max. So we're talking ultra this, super that. The type of thing where you're going to need a little bit more video memory maybe, but to be perfectly honest with you, even with that, you're not really going to be hitting the buffers on this too much with a single screen. So the 680 kind of is only really going to come into its own when you're starting to think about triple screens, and even then you're really going to be wanting a couple of 680s for that. So for a single screen setup, honestly, the 670 is going to be an absolute corker of a buy, and a much wiser purchase than the 680. I think the 680 now has become an e-penis card, probably with the 690 as well, to be honest with you. Like I said, unless you're going to be running triple screens, and by that I mean that you're not really going to be getting much more out of it by spending all that extra money. It's quite literally just going to be about the numbers in your spec list and bragging rights on forums. I think the 670 is probably a very, very smart buy for the majority of you out there, and it's only really, for me personally, the fact that the PCB is so small and the kind of floating power things in the middle of nowhere that would, spoil it for me personally. I would have great difficulty wanting to put this in my system if I had to look at it for what, to explain. So fingers crossed when the vendors bring their own cards out, and by that I mean when they start making their own PCBs, hopefully they'll have the thought to have to, make them slightly bigger, get the power connections on the end, and once they've got their own cooling on there, we'll be absolutely laughing. So yeah, that's it guys. Hopefully my thoughts on the 670 have been worth the wait. I do apologise, I'm not normally late with stuff, as you will know, but then again, I'm never normally ill either. So again, apologies, but we'll be back on track very soon, don't you worry. But for now at least, with the gold award winning Nvidia GTX670, this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you. Out.